Welcome back, guys. This week we're talking about altruism, which is the belief that you or some group of people must sacrifice another group of people or another person, or be sacrificed yourself for the good of everybody. It is a win-lose or lose-win mindset. People talk about an abundance mentality or some sort of abundance mindset. You hear that term a lot. Well, altruism is the opposite of that. And you may be thinking, well, when people say altruism, they don't really mean that somebody must be sacrificed. Well, then why don't you just say benevolence? If you're talking about being nice, then why don't you say benevolence? You say altruism. And we see altruism rampant everywhere. Men often feel like they need to sacrifice themselves, especially for a woman, for a company, for their country, a lot of different things. Effective altruism, we need to give Africa money in the right way in order to help Africa. It's insane. The implication is Africa cannot help itself. And of course, women, naturally more agreeable, they're much more likely to be altruistic in the sense that they need to sacrifice themselves or put their own needs aside for the sake of some relationship, for whatever it is they happen to be involved in, a political movement. Every political movement asks some sort of altruism, from some sort of sacrifice from you for the good of what? The collective. Now, a lot of objectivists will use this word altruism, and I like the way that they use it. They identify correctly. Yeah, altruism implies self-sacrifice or some sort of sacrifice. But what a lot of objectivists talk about, and not just objectivists, but a lot of people who talk about altruism, they treat it like we are altruistic because it was imbued on us from our culture, from our civilization. So the two most prominent religions, well, I'll just say any monotheistic religion, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, preaches altruism, some sacrifice for another world, and that's true, but also secular religions like Marxism preach sacrifice for the good of the group. And when people talk about it, it's just like, yeah, this is just imbued on us from culture. Sorry, I can see my reflection in the window because it's night, so I'm going to be looking at myself a lot. Pardon my vanity. So, yeah, they just treat it like it's imbued on us from culture. And I think there may be some truth to that, but ultimately, I think the reason why we practice or preach altruism is because, of course, we cannot manage our emotions in the right way. Like I said in the beginning of this video, altruism is about win-lose or lose-win. And when do we find ourselves with a win-lose or lose-win mindset, either sacrificing ourselves or sacrificing somebody else for us? That's right. When we're down here, hostility is when we're managing our anger, it becomes hostility. It is slightly conscious, slightly unconscious. And when anxiety comes in, threats, any sort of potential loss out there, it comes in, we experience it as anxiety. We can't really manage it, so it becomes powerlessness. It becomes helplessness, martyrdom, complaining, passive aggressiveness. You have your box of anxiety, right? Or anger. Either your Aunt Bertha or cousin Uncle Vinny. Not Cousin Vinny, that's the movie. Or Uncle Vinny. And you don't know how to manage it because you don't know how to assert your need or confront the anxiety, so you just dump it on somebody else. That is altruism. That is ultimately why we have these religions, both on the right and the left, secular or otherwise, that preach altruism. It's all a way, it's all a worldview that we project out because we can't manage our anxiety and our anger, our two fundamental emotions. A great movie, a great Christmas movie that demonstrates the power of altruism and how it plays out in our lives when we don't know how to manage our emotions, specifically in the case of this movie, specifically when we don't know how to manage anxiety, is of course National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, starring Chevy Chase, the iconic Chevy Chase. Like him or hate him, doesn't matter. He is a cultural icon. A lot like Pauly Shore, actually. And it just, throughout the whole movie, Clark Griswold, Chevy Chase, the character, can't handle his anxiety, and it plays out. He takes it out on other people. He sacrifices himself. I mean, it all starts out in the beginning of the movie when they go and get go to cut down the Griswold family Christmas tree, and Audrey is becoming numb from the bottom up. By the end, she can't even see the tree because her eyeballs are numb or frozen, whatever happens to be, and it's just accepted by Clark because it's just like it's part of the experience to him, because it just indicates that there's this seed that there needs to be some sort of sacrifice to get what we want. Not investment, that's something else. You're always going to have to invest to get what you want, but to sacrifice who you are to get what you want. That's a great opening scene because it shows, the seed of altruism, or of course, dysregulated anxiety in Clark's mind. Clark cannot talk with his boss directly. His boss, Frank Shirley, played, of course, by Brian Doyle Murray. He's always being a yes man, I guess it was. Often how employees are portrayed contrary to their bosses in 80s movies. The point is, he can't be honest with his boss, so what does he do? He's passive-aggressive with all his bosses' lieutenants. That's the kiss my ass, kiss your ass, happy Hanukkah scene. Can't talk, can't confront, which we're going to get to later on in the movie. If you've seen the movie, he can't do this with his boss, so he does this with the lieutenants. He can't manage his anxiety, so he dumps it off. He sacrifices other people's happiness, other people's mood to feel better about himself. Altruism. Then, of course, the family comes to visit, and that's a huge pain in the butt. Why? Not because the family's visiting, but because Clark feels like he needs to sacrifice his house for the sake of the family. He needs to sacrifice his happiness for the sake of the family. And then, of course, what does he do? He gets involved in OCD. I know we're not really talking about this thing that we can do with anxiety, this decision we can make, which is really no decision at all. But he's avoiding the anxiety. But again, it's all on the spectrum, right? Go back and watch the lectures I did on anxiety. It's all on a spectrum. He gets wrapped up in his own OCD behavior, which, of course, is putting on all those lights on his house. But why? Not because the family's over so much, but he has to sacrifice himself. He can't be honest with his family. Just has to play nice throughout the entire holiday. That's a sacrifice. There's a win-lose, and then, of course, Cousin Eddie visits, and he has to take them on, not saying, hey, we don't really have room for you and all this. But it culminates with, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here. And then the one other thing that Clark does is he writes the check for the deposit for the pool, even though he doesn't have that money in his bank account. He's depending on the Christmas bonus from Frank Shirley to cover the check. Otherwise, the check's going to bounce. And why is he getting the pool? You can say that he wants his family to have a good time, but ultimately he's sacrificing himself. I mean, if you're writing checks that your bank account can't cash, it's no longer benevolence. You are sacrificing yourself for the good of the family. You're being a martyr, essentially. There's anxiety there you don't know how to handle, conversations there you don't know how to have. We'll get to it. So you must sacrifice. In that case, Clark plays the martyr and he sacrifices himself. Still a form of altruism. And it all culminates because Clark is, I think it's Christmas Eve, and Clark is getting really agitated. And he thinks that the Christmas bonus came, but it turns out it's a Jelly of the Month club. He goes on that huge tirade, a lot of victimization, a lot of hostility. A need, it went unmet, an injustice isn't rectified. He doesn't know how to handle it in an appropriate way. He takes it out on his family. He says, hey, anybody has any last minute Christmas ideas? I want my boss, Frank Shirley, wrapped up in a bow. Cousin Eddie, probably not the best regulator. You need some intelligence to do this, to stay conscious with your emotions. We all know Cousin Eddie has that play in his head. So he goes and gets Frank Shirley, ties him up in the bow. But what solves it? What solves all the emotional turmoil as represented by the existential turmoil? Clark finally has a conversation with his boss, tells him exactly what he needs, tells him, more importantly, exactly how he feels, and he needs help from the group. His son Russ chimes in, says something about how it really sucks that he didn't get his Christmas bonus that year. He's honest. All these needs, all this anxiety, he confronts it. He asserts the need, tells his boss exactly what he needs, what he could have done in the beginning of the movie, but then we wouldn't have had, all the hullabaloo that ended up being a great Christmas movie. He gets the raise plus 15%, or he gets the Christmas bonus, plus 15%, as represented by, everybody coming together and getting along, not sacrificing yourself for your family, not asking your family to sacrifice themselves for you, but a genuine sense of connection that is ultimately what Christmas is about. Just some signs that you are more likely to succumb to altruism, because I don't think that this is a choice. I mean, that's the point here. And I think that's what people, when they do criticize altruism, this is what they get wrong. They think it's some sort of choice. It's just an idea imbued on us in civilization that, while that may be part of it, I think altruism is inevitably what happens when we don't know how to manage our anxiety. And what we do, and eventually, is we create, like I said before, belief structures, whether it's a religion or a secular religion, that justify the altruism, that justify our emotional dysregulation, not really understanding that the view of altruism comes from the dysregulation in the first place, not the projected view of the world, be it Christianity, Judaism, Islam on one end, and Marxism on the other. So here's just some signs that indicate that you might you're more likely to succumb to altruism. Whenever you're helping somebody, do you see it as a sacrifice? Do you think that you need to help somebody in order for them to like you, to be perceived a certain way? It's not really because you want to help, but you're doing it for some sort of social good, as opposed to helping because you genuinely want to help. And some of you may be watching this and thinking, well, isn't all helping some sort of sacrifice? No, you can genuinely help somebody because it helps you too. I mean, I've been a tutor before, I've been a TA before. So you help out students, you help out somebody working with material. It helps me to teach it. It helps them to learn it. I can see the material in a different way by teaching it, and it's good to see, for my benefit, to see other students learn something, especially something I care about if I'm teaching a psychology course. How do you defend yourself? Do you defend yourself in an emotional way, like you're trying to protect yourself from the criticism of others? Or can you calmly defend yourself? That one's not that great, but it's okay. But this one's more important. Do you constantly feel victimized? Like we talked about with victimhood in the powerlessness, helplessness video. Of course, anybody can be a victim in the short term. But if being victimized is part of your narrative that you tell yourself, if you're constantly getting victimized, if you think that's just the way the world is set up, then you're much more likely to succumb to altruism. Why? Because you're down here. You can't manage your anxiety. I would suggest instead, negotiate. Who are you being victimized by? Are you like Clark in the beginning of Christmas Vacation? Felt like he was victimized by his boss? Well, you're going to have to negotiate at some point. You're going to have to bring up your needs. You're going to have to confront that anxiety at some point. Otherwise, you're going to succumb to altruism. You may even become an effective altruist, which would be terrible. And then do you isolate or do you talk out your, especially difficult issues, and there's probably at least 3 issues in your life, 3 difficult conversations that you need to have and you're not having. Do you just pretend it's no big deal? Do you isolate or do you talk it out? I guess this is sort of like this one up here. I'm just trying to give you guys a good indication of how likely are you going to naturally succumb to altruism? Because if you're over here, if you can't do this, then this is going to happen. Either you're going to feel like you need to sacrifice yourself for others, or others are going to think that others need to sacrifice themselves for you. They're either going to victimize or be victimized. And as we all know, as we learned from World War II, the more you feel like you're victimized, the more likely you are eventually going to victimize others. And I think this is a great topic to bring up in Christmas, because we get the sense that Christmas is about giving. I mean, a foundational Christmas text in our culture is the Charles Dickens Christmas. What's that book by Christmas Tale? Oh man, now I forget. Written by Charles Dickens. As soon as I hit stop, I'm going to remember. A Christmas Story. Oh man, Ebenezer Scrooge. Anyways, the implicit premise throughout that whole book was that Ebenezer Scrooge needed to give to the poor. He had to give to the poor, otherwise the poor couldn't have done anything on their own. Altruism is built into, some of our most beloved Christmas stories, Christmas plays, like A Christmas Carol. There we go. But that's not what Christmas is about. That's what Christmas is about when we can't regulate our emotions. But since you're watching this video, since you understand how our emotions work, then we can see really what Christmas is about when we confront our anxiety, when we can assert our anger. It is about goodwill towards men. Because the implication is, what I just said, you can have win-win, mutually beneficial relationships with other men, but it all comes from you, how you manage your anxiety. The threats come in. You can do one of 3 things generally, although of course this is all on the spectrum. You can do one of 3 things. You can avoid it. You can either victimize, lose-win, win-lose, altruism, or you can confront the threat exactly for what it is. Same thing with anger. The needs come in, injustices come in, causes anger. Do we assert our need? Do we act like Clark Griswold at the end of Christmas Vacation? Tell our boss exactly what we need. Just negotiate. Have some sort of talk. Can we do that? And I think the more that we do that, the more likely we'll see the true spirit of Christmas, which is, of course, the ability to live with your fellow man with a sense of goodwill, harmony, and who knows, maybe even peace as the end result of all that. That's it for this week, guys. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. More importantly, though, as always, talk about this stuff. Talk about this stuff with your friends, with your family. Have honest, just, super honest. How honest can you really be with somebody else sitting there looking at you? And I think the more you do that, the better you'll begin to regulate. Christmas is going to be a lot more fun, and if nothing else, you won't succumb, you won't ruin anybody else's Christmas with the belief of altruism.